Hey everyone. Since we started this show, we realized that we've changed from our original fun with using the rules to break the game. And the more we chat about D&D 5th edition rules with all of our guests, we've realized that we love using the rules to make our games actually better. Now, instead of seeing loopholes for exploits, we see opportunities for creative solutions to challenges. And when some people hear rules as written, it does conjure images of rules lawyers and a denial to the rule of cool. Our hope is that by sharing how to apply, adapt, and improve the rules, you can make your games more fun for players and for DMs alike. So, thanks for joining us.
Hi, this is Bethany.
Hey, this is Tony.
Hey, Rachel here.
Hi, I'm Eric. I'm new here.
Find D&D Raw on all your favorite podcatchers, and you can follow us on Twitter at RulesAsWritten. You can email us at dm@dndraw.com. You can join us on Discord with the link in the description, and feel free to support us on Patreon at patreon.com/dndraw. So, today we're going to be talking about broken feats, the good and the bad. So, Eric, where can people find you on Twitter?
You can find me at Eldritch Crow, all one word, nothing fancy about it. You can find me at that on Discord as well.
Okay. So, Eric, why don't you tell us about your creative projects?
Do you have 2 hours?
Okay, we'll take the abridged.
Yeah, the abridged version. I'm part of the Dice Knights podcast. You can find us on Podbean, podbean.com/Dice Knights.
Quick question. Is that Knights K-N-I-T-S?
That was my original pitch for the title, but no, we swapped it to N-I-G-H-T-S.
Aww.
Okay, Rachel, you have to explain why you're so disappointed, because now it sounds like you're disappointed in his podcast title.
No, just, I was thinking knights, like, our knights.
No, I feel the same. Those are pirates.
Also, yeah, arg, knights.
Arg, nice.
Arg, knights of the round table. I don't know. I'm tired. What do you
No,
want?
I just meant because we went to the University of Central Florida, and the team is the Knights, so they put Knights on everything, so for years afterwards, every time we see the word Knights, I think all of us are like, Knights with a K? Yes? Yeah. Like, no, it's with an N. Okay, that probably makes sense, but I feel like it should be a K, so.
I wanted it to be a K. I got outvoted.
Aww. It happens.
It's okay.
We would side with you.
We're getting, like, real dirt here from your podcast. This is
Right. On tonight's episode.
Yeah. But anyway, sorry. You were continuing to tell us what else you're doing.
So I'm part of that podcast. We have a couple of other projects for expanding that content that might be happening. I also have a major kind of game setting that I'm going to be launching towards the end of the month. Fingers crossed. Via World Anvil, which is absolutely amazing. We got to interview them on Dice Nights a little while ago, so that episode's up there. And so that'll be kind of my next big project coming up. I'm also part of the Playcasters Discord server as an admin, so if any of you are fellow podcasters listening, or streamers or whatever for tabletop content, come find us, please. We want all the friends.
Yeah. Let's say, what part of the country are you in?
I'm up in southern Ontario, up in Canada.
Oh, well, thank you for joining us from so far away. I'm sure you're not having the same weather we are, which is super hot and super rainy.
We are having the same weather you are. It's just sort of cooled down because it's been raining on and off all day, so.
I was going to say, what is hot weather for your neck of the woods?
We can crack 100 pretty easily. It depends on the summer, but it's been getting more extreme lately, unfortunately. I'm surrounded on 3 sides by Great Lakes, so a lot of the weather here will be similar to Florida.
nice and moist. Rachel's like, no. So, I think we should get into the discussion.
Oh, please.
We're going to be going over our choices for good and bad feats, which we are all using our own criteria for what we think makes this feat broken, for better or for worse. So we'll each explain it one by one as we get there. I just want to, qualify. We aren't going to talk about the lucky feat. This was very hard for me because I really love the lucky feat, and I have so many great stories because I've had the lucky feat for a character that made it to level 15. So there are a lot of instances of how awesome it was. Also, that time I used all my luck points and still failed to save. That was a good one too. But I am not going to talk about that, despite starting to talk about that, because we talked about it extensively in our luck episode from a couple years ago. So if you want to hear us talk about all the lucky feat stories, those are there. Otherwise, I'll be like, why aren't we talking about it? Because
it's uber broken.
Well, yeah.
In good ways for the player and bad ways for the DM.
Yeah.
Great ways for the player. Then you just introduce an NPC that has it too. Anyways.
Not that Tony would do that.
Never.
But I think we're going to start with the good. And Eric, I had you up first. You picked Magic Initiate. Walk us through it. What's the story here?
So, Magic Initiate on first glance, isn't that broken in a good way. It's fairly bog standard in terms of feats. It's not too overpowered. You get 2 cantrips from a particular spell list, so you can pick Wizard, any of the other casters.
Wizard or the others.
Wizard or the others. Wizards, Warlocks, Bards, Druids, any full caster spell list. And you have to use the same stat associated with that spell list. So if you go Warlock, you have to use Charisma. If you go Wizard, you have to use Intelligence, so on. And then you get a first level spell from that list that you can use once a day. However, this gets very broken very quickly, depending on the circumstances. So we have Magic Initiate Wizard written down here because that was my first thought. I did this accidentally. It was because I was thinking of flavor for the character more than I was thinking of mechanics, and then the mechanics sort of worked out. Because what the Wizard spell list is really good at is giving you spells that don't require saves or attack rolls. So they don't rely on any kind of stat to roll. So you can actually pick Magic Initiate Wizard while having a low intelligence, and pick a couple of cantrips and a first level spell that don't rely on that stat whatsoever. For example, Shield. You know, you suddenly become a lot less squishy for 1 attack-ish, depending on the circumstances, because it technically lasts until your next turn, but that very rarely comes into effect, I find.
Oh, you say that, but I'm pretty sure we've seen people take a lot of attacks in 1 turn.
That's fair. In my circumstances, most of the time someone's using a shield, they're only getting hit once because my party is very good at keeping things spread out ever since I dropped some Hellflares on them from a Death Knights.
Oh.
Yeah, they have a Hellfire Orb. I call it a Hellflare for some reason.
Yeah, it's bad. It's real bad.
It's a fireball, but better. I dropped a Death Knight with multiple of those, because normally they only get 1. And ever since then, my party has been very spread out. But, that said, Magic Initiate Wizard came up by accident because I made a Warlock who was previously a Wizard. And they're Celestial Warlocks, so they get a lot of healing. And the cool thing about Wizard is they're one of basically 2 classes that gets Find Familiar. Because the other one is Warlock if you take Pact of the Chain. I didn't. I should have. So, Pact of the Blade, Celestial Warlock, and then I took Find Familiar because I'm like, oh, this will be cool flavor and some backstory stuff, because I had the Familiar build as the first spell this character's wife taught him. So, he gets this Fox Familiar back, and then I realized I had Cure Wounds. So, the thing about Find Familiar is you can cast a touch spell through it, which all of a sudden gives you your Cure Wounds at lower levels a range of, I think 30 feet is the total range on Find Familiar when you're casting spells through it, which is amazing at low levels.
Yeah, and also, familiars are super cute, but yeah, the using familiars to cast touch spells is literally the only thing that kept my original sorcerer alive. Was like, I got you guys! Yep. You go do you, tiny weasel.
And then I got 2 cantrips out of it, Prestidigitation and Mage Hand, which are both super useful as well, in their own weird ways. And then the other thing is, being able to scout through a familiar is also super broken.
Yeah.
Like, you don't realize it, but there are small enough and stealthy enough creatures as familiars that are, like, really difficult to kill if they don't get noticed. So all of a sudden, you get to see and you get to plan ahead. Or in my case, you get to send a familiar with the dumb rogue, who tries to go shank a hag in the middle of the night.
Oh no.
So the only reason that rogue lived is because my familiar went with them and informed us, hey, they're doing something stupid.
So you're using your familiar as a scout / chaperone, if I'm understanding correctly?
Yeah, exactly.
Checks out.
Medivac.
Yeah.
Was another one.
Medivac. Okay, good.
One other broken thing, giving sorcerers Eldritch Blast.
Well.
Yeah, it's nasty. Oh, and by the way, the familiar has to be within 100 feet of you.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think it's ridiculous, the range, yeah.
That is my mistake. Yeah, I thought it was shorter than that.
Because I think this recently came up when we were talking with one of our players in one of our campaign groups. Adam plays a warlock who has a familiar who's a pseudo-dragon. And pseudo-dragon has been very helpful many times. But, Adam keeps discovering, like, oh my gosh, it can do all this stuff. Yes, Adam, you've had the stat block the whole time. He's like, I keep forgetting.
Pseudo-dragons are also the most busted familiar, and only warlocks get them, and it's amazing.
Yes.
They are amazing.
And let's clarify, Adam did not pick it because it was super busted. He picked it because it was super cute. And that was all he cared about. Yeah. When you're looking at the familiar list, you're like, some players look for utility. Some people go, who's going to look super cute perched on my shoulder? And that was, I think, how he made the decision.
Yeah, I did that too. And then it's just like, oh, wait, they can do all these things? Sweet. Yeah. And then, giving a sorcerer Eldritch Blast is nuts. Like, with meta magic options available already, Eldritch Blast is probably the best damage dealing cantrip in the game.
Yeah, Rachel, why don't you tell us how you feel about Eldritch Blast?
Hey. why cast Eldritch Blast when you can turn into a T-Rex? I mean, just
at certain
saying.
levels, yeah.
I mean,
but
at certain levels, yeah.
I like stabbing things better than going pew pew.
yeah, Rachel got some flack for building a warlock who didn't have Eldritch
I didn't have
Blast.
Eldritch Blast.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
And she's like, well, I've got cooler stuff. So.
I went Eldritch Blast or not Eldritch Blast, Warlock and Fighter, and was basically a Pact of the Blade, like a melee Warlock. So
stab, stab.
Stab, stab, go get knocked down, come back up with Celestial Radiance of Awesomeness, because it was the...
Undying Light.
Undying Light.
Undying.
Yeah, so it's the Undying Light. So, yep. And then T-Rex. Rawr.
And then T-Rex rawr.
Because that's how it always
Because
ends.
polymorph.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, polymorph.
It gets
So much
pretty
fun.
ridiculous pretty fast. So your point for Magic Initiate is you think it's kind of broken because it has several different ways it can, well, if not completely break things down, but it can give you a lot of utility or just power or just something you wouldn't have access to otherwise that can really synergize with your class without having a multi-class or anything.
Another thought is, if you have a high wisdom sorcerer, suddenly you take Guiding Bolt off the cleric spell list, and there's a weird combo there where you can double up a Guiding Bolt because Metamagic has the one twin spell option,
spell.
which only works on single target spells.
I love Guiding Bolt so much.
Bread and butter.
4d6.
Yeah, for a while I got to control an NPC cleric who was with our party in Tony's campaign, and I loved her. She was the best. She would Guiding Bolt, and then she would heal us. Like, she was the best of all of us. But yeah, Guiding Bolt's awesome.
Giving that to a sorcerer who can suddenly say, oh, once a day I can double up a Guiding Bolt on 2 targets is amazing.
Yeah, there's a reason that sorcerers are my favorite. I mean, not that the other classes aren't great, but I'm all about the meta magic. It's fun to have the flexibility, and you don't get the spell list, but here you're saying you can get some more spells, so it can give you a little more versatility. So I guess something to ask, I've never used Magic Initiate. I tend to go more into a multi-classing route and do like something that does not just spell casting, but I suppose most of the instances we're talking about is a caster who's taking a Magic Initiate to get additional casting, but you could be a non-caster if you have the stats for it, right?
Oh yeah, totally. Anyone can take it. It's a great way to add a little bit of caster flavor to someone who might not have started as a caster.
Yeah.
For me personally, I go the multi-classing route a lot as well, but I'm what I would refer to as a cantrip hoarder. I like getting as many cantrips as I possibly can. So, like, at one point, I was tinkering around and just building another Celestial Warlock, and I realized that if you go, like, Celestial and take Pact of the Tome, I think it is, and Magic Initiate, you can have something like 9 cantrips at, like, level 4. It's ridiculous.
I will say it's not for everyone. I know some people who have a hard time coping with the number of spells they already have, and they're like, I don't need more options, and I'm like, that's why you're not playing a wizard. Remember, like...
Or a Warlock. Like, there's so much customization. It's...
Oh, yeah.
Let's go with something like a ranger. You know, let's like pare this down. I realized actually we didn't mention something that I think we referred to in previous episodes, but feats are an optional, like a very
Technically, yes.
Technically,
Feats are optional.
I've never heard directly from anyone who says they don't allow them. I know Tony though has clarified that we're not all able to take all feats, even if mechanically we can, because there needs to be some sort of narrative.
I like
connection.
story reason
Same.
why.
One of the best/worst decisions I made at the beginning of my campaign when I'm running Prince of the Apocalypse. Not really anymore. It was Prince of the Apocalypse. It's evolved. It's become something, I was going to say more, different. It's become something very different. But they have story hooks, and the game wants you to incentivize your players to complete their, like, story hook, which is, like, to find a magic book, to uncover the meaning of a map, by giving them inspiration when they complete it. You know, a task that requires many, many
Like
sessions.
half the campaign at least.
Some of these up to level 10, I'm like, and at the end, I give them inspiration, the thing I give them every session anyways when I'm rewarding them for, you know, doing a great job. So I was like, yeah, forget that. I'm going to give them something else. So I was like, guys, all right, when you complete your story hook, you get either a really cool magic item or a feat. And I was like, they're going to want the magic stuff. Everybody picked feats. So everybody got a bonus feat at a certain point. And it, of course, made them really powerful, especially those who completed their hooks really early.
What?
Yep.
No.
But I thought it was great. And then I always gave a feat that was like tied to that story hook. And there's enough feats that there's something flavor wise. So one was getting revenge on some elemental cultists. So we got elemental adept. So it wasn't like the most mechanically sound choice, but it made those moments of completing the stories very exciting. So it's like, feats! What's my feat? Surprise feat! So, Mage Slayer. Mage Slayer I thought was good, and then Tony has it for his character, who is a Goliath fighter barbarian, in a campaign where he is mostly fighting casters.
Oh, yes.
I've just tried to decide how many sad stories I have because of Mage Slayer for my sad little scrappy casters who would have been great. But okay, so what the feat does, when a creature that's like within reach, it lets you take an opportunity attack if they cast a spell. So boom, reaction, opportunity attack. When you damage someone who's concentrating on a spell, they have disadvantage on their saving throw. You have advantage on saving against spells if they're cast by you when you're within reach. So basically, if you're that guy, if you're Tony's character who runs up to the casters, you're in their face, you're wailing on them with your long sword, and then basically every single one of these abilities goes off every single round. It's like maximum utility in that use case. Now, granted, that wouldn't be true for every campaign, but this would work for pretty much anybody who's going to be in melee fighting casters. And it's brutal for those casters because they are made to cast spells, focus on spells, hurt you with spells, and when they get punished, basically in a very literal way for all of those things, sorry, I'm not bitter. It's they die really fast is what I'm saying, because also Tony's character was kind of a crit machine for a while. So
it also didn't help that on top of the Mage Slayer, I have a Vorpal sword.
Oh, Lord.
Sorry, DM, I made bad choices. I thought...
No. I will never say giving an item to a character is a bad choice, because I'm a person who has canonically overpowered my players, because I wanted them to play a campaign starting at a low level, but I wanted it to ramp up very quickly, because I set a doomsday clock for my campaign session 1.
Gotcha. Rachel, would you say this? I would say this was a bad choice. Rachel, from your experience, having seen as a player at the table, was this a bad choice, giving him the Vorpal sword with his Mage Slayer? And
No,
it was wonderful. It was wonderful. It's worked out so well.
So many sad caster deaths. Tony's character's a beast. That's the one where Rachel plays the paladin. So she's like there, like, being all like meaty and beefy and like doing the healing and spiting, and he's just wailing on them and they'd go down so very fast. But yeah, love Mage Slayer. I think it's fantastic. I
love Mage Slayer.
I underestimate it because it's such a blandly written feat. It's not one that like sounds jazzy. It's like, here's some mechanical things, but they're all super useful.
Yeah, the fighter just has to get within 5 feet. Oh, the fighter is always getting within 5 feet of
because
the casters. Because his ally can also cast Fly on him. Oh no.
Any feat that gives you something to do that is not an action is busted.
Yeah. So that's why it was my feat that stands out as just being a winner, but a little bit bitterly from the DM side. So speaking of me as a bitter DM, Rachel, tell us about Sentinel.
Ooh, Sentinel. That's my feat of choice. And I really like it because it's come in handy quite a few times in our game. Whenever you hit a creature with an opportunity attack, its speed drops to 0 for the rest of the turn. This stops any movement they may have been taking. So usually when they're trying to run away, opportunity attack triggered, you hit, they stop.
This needs brackets, works on dragons.
Yes, works on any.
So there's a story attached to that, since you mentioned dragons.
Yeah, so the other thing it does is creatures within your reach provoke attack of opportunity, or opportunity attacks, even if they took the disengage action. I don't think I've used that one too much, but the other one I have, which is when a creature within your reach makes an attack against a target other than you, and that target doesn't have this feat, you can use your reaction to make a melee weapon attack against the attacking creature. So, all the free attacking and stopping.
It's really not the attacking that's the big deal so much as the stopping from the DM side.
Which is the DM bitter side.
The DM bitter side is because there's no size restriction.
There's no size restriction.
Yeah, there's no restriction.
Yeah.
So what happened, Rachel, the first time?
So, one of the first times that I got to use it, and it was glorious, is we were in
the water temple.
And there was a giant dragon turtle. And we had kind of spread into a way where he couldn't hit all of us with his steam breathy thing. And then he was like, oh, I'm just gonna shimmy over here to, like, hit you all in this cone of breath. And I'm like, no. So Bethany got stopped on hitting us all and only had to hit, like, 2 of us instead of, the whole party.
The 2 tanky ones.
The ones who could take the hit very casters.
Well. Like, poor dragon turtle. Then he didn't ever get to move again until he died, and they harvested his leather. Yep. It was brutal.
And turned it into capes.
Yeah. I mean, putting Sentinel on a monk is insane. You see that in CR Season 2 all the time.
Yep.
I have a monk character in one of the other home games I play in. I almost took Sentinel, and then I didn't take it because I knew how mean it would be.
It's okay, all's fair. It's just like, oh right, that's a thing you could do. So, I think onto Tony's Shield Master. He's going to talk about his character again. Tell us about Shield Master, Tony.
Shield Master is an amazing feat. If you take the attack action, you can use a bonus action to shove a creature with your shield. If you aren't incapacitated, you can add your shield's AC bonus to any dex save against a spell or other effect that affects only you. If you're subjected to an effect that allows you to make a dex save for half damage, you can use your reaction for no damage.
Evasion for strength characters.
Yes.
That is what
it is. Amazing. I took it for my character. At one point, we were fighting a bunch of hellhounds. This is the first time I used that third effect, when you're just like, all right, the hellhound is now going to breathe fire amongst all of you. I'm like, I take no damage. Well, fine, because I also have danger sense, which gives me advantage on dex saves.
Barbarians, man. People forget barbarians get shields proficiencies.
Yeah.
And this is the reason. I have it on my my half drow paladin K in the stream.
Yeah, and I'll say honestly, story-wise, this made sense because Tony's character has this like connection to a shield he's been carrying for the whole campaign. So like he was like, I'm gonna take Shield Master. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. So you've like mastered the shield. You talk about the shield all the time.
Also, I see 2 party members that both have evasion, and I'm like, maybe I can do that just with my shield.
Yeah, and then there's me watching you all evade all the fire and going, I'll just take the fire.
I have told our sorcerer, I was like, no, go ahead, drop the fireball in the room I'm in.
Do it.
I'll be fine. Just careful spell me.
Yeah, and then the monk's like, yeah, me too, Rogue. Yeah, me too. And Rachel's like, you keep that away from me.
Catch me on fire and I will slit your throat.
And here's the thing is, the way this is worded gets a little bit weird because it says affects only you at the end.
Yes.
Which means if someone casts an AoE spell and you're the only creature in range, you can still trigger your ability here.
Yes.
Which
where you
nuts.
can still add your bonus.
Yeah. So all of a sudden you're getting the bonus, plus if you save, you're taking no damage. It's basically the feat for anyone that wants to be Captain America, hence why I took it.
Yeah. Get in there. Yeah, and I think also this plays like a lot of these sort of synergize together. This is another one that's really great if you're fighting against casters.
Shield Master plus Mage Slayer.
That's what his character has. This is the same character. This is what
I've
I'm
got
up against.
these 2
This is why I'm
feats.
sad.
I'm so sorry, Bethany.
That's okay. I mean, I knew I was running them to level 15, so I was like, they're gonna get powerful. It's totally fine. I will just torment them emotionally. I'm sorry. I will just play mind games with them.
I mean, I understand that. I killed all of Vox Machina in my campaign.
Oh, that's dark. That's weak.
I understand, though.
Percy and Vex are still alive, but they're the only 2 left.
Oh, at least they're happy together. But yeah.
They're alive.
But I guess anything else to add about Shield Master besides, it's great. If you have a shield, you should take Shield Master if you can.
If you're a barbarian who can shove people and has a Vorpal sword, so you don't have to do Reckless, but you also have Reckless.
Yep, it's kind of great. The other nice thing about it is crowd control. Like, if you're the character that is in the middle of a huge swarm, having that bonus action strike, like, I didn't have extra attack yet when we were dealing with the end of this arc. So I was standing there distracting a horde of eyeless, and all of a sudden, I'm not dealing damage on both attacks, but I have 2 attacks. So I can at least hit, trip one up, and move. And they kept missing because of Shield of Faith. I had a 20 AC, or 19 armor class.
I was like, 19 AC. What's your AC, Tony? What is it now?
23.
Yeah,
wait a minute.
It's just the 23. Yeah, no, but yeah, no, 1920 is great. I'm just rubbing it in how obnoxious.
Level 1, I had 19.
I know.
It was great. Because defense, fighting style, and shield. Anyway, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I picked the wrong fighting style, I think. But I built the character with the intent of having him switch between kind of 2 modes, where one of them is just full-out greatsword damage, and then the other is sword and board tank a little bit. So all of the fighting style stuff is geared towards the greatsword, and then the feat is geared towards the sword and shield kind of deal. So it's a weird spread, but it works very well flavor-wise, I find. It also gives you kind of a much clearer delineation of when you're doing certain things. So you know when the shield's out, you're going to attack and use a shield bash. When you know the greatsword's out, you're going to swing and smite for days.
Yeah. Tony's character does a lot of weapon swapping too, so he just lets me know, like, all right, we're gonna go with the dwarven thrower now. And I'm like, I gave him Thor's hammer. I have no one to blame but myself.
That is all your fault.
That's all your fault.
Okay, I didn't actually give it to you. You found it, and then you, like, It's a long
because we saved a dwarven king's spirit. We were blessed, and any of us could use it, even though we weren't dwarves. And
I thought someone else would want it. They're like, no, I think Tony's character should have it. And I'm like, but does he need it?
I have no range, so a nice 60-foot range, it's worth, and I can also make it reckless.
So to your point, Eric, I don't think it's a spoiler now for Endgame to say basically Tony's character is Captain America in Endgame with shield and
My next step, take magic initiate and just some lightning spells.
Please no.
What level of barbarian are you? You could just go Storm Herald.
Because I needed to be the tank, I went totem.
Oh, fair.
So I know there's a lot of other great feats out there that are broken for better or for worse. I think we all were drawn to different ones that we have a personal connection to from...
Cough, cough, lucky cough.
Yeah. We won't talk about it, but I love it so much. More dice to reduce bad odds. But yeah. I think that's we've got a good spread here. Though I think we focused really on things that are going to help you in combat. We seem to have been attached to some non-combat feats for our bad ones, but I know you have another combat one.
I have my good reasons, but
yeah.
Anyway.
So, Eric, you had Heavy Armor Master.
There is a reason I picked this one, and it is that it becomes utterly useless past level 5, roughly.
It's -3 to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing.
However, it's only non-magical. That's specified in the feat. So, I was looking at this feat, it was this or Shieldmaster for my paladin, because he has a 14 strength, which means he can't wield the heaviest armors, because you need a minimum 15 strength to wear, plate armor and stuff. Now, Heavy Armor Master bumps your strength by 1, and you subtract 3 points of damage from any non-magical bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage you take, which is great at low levels.
Yeah.
And then at higher levels, when you start fighting things that are magical creatures, all of a sudden everything deals magical bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, and this feat effectively becomes null because you're getting the stat boost out of it, but it's 1 point you could have gotten that with an ability score increase. There's a really easy way they could have made this better. All they had to do was add on a little tag that says, if your armor is magical. So all of a sudden, once you're wearing magic heavy armor, it works against magic damage. And it would make it relevant again, and I'd probably house rule it like that. So I call this one broken very simply because at higher levels, it's a waste of a feat, unfortunately.
I sort of feel like it's missing a third bullet. Most of the ones feats I'm drawn to have at least three things they do, and this one's like, here's a +1 to a stat and -3 damage. You don't get a third thing. Don't get greedy.
You know what would have been cool is -3 damage, -3 magical damage if you're wearing magic armor, because I feel like that's a very situational thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, third bullet point, advantage on saves against being moved against your will because you're super heavy.
Because you're a meaty tank.
Yeah.
I mean, wearing plate armor and stuff, it'd be really difficult to move you 10 feet against your will. So I feel like that'd be a fair addition.
Or have the movement that you would get forced moved or something like that even.
Yeah, because forced movement is a pretty rare thing, especially for player abilities, unless you're playing with spells like telekinesis. But repelling blast for warlocks is one of the only low-level ways to get forced movement out of stuff.
Other than just grappling somebody.
Yeah, so it's really rare. And even in monster stat blocks and stuff, forcing movement is rare unless they're huge and can just grab you. So it'd be interesting to see something to counter that. But as it is, it's just kind of lackluster.
Yeah. I mean, I know for Rachel, when you had this, low levels, yeah, it definitely was helpful, and especially when you were, full-on tank, and then your role shifted to being more of a healer. And, I mean, over the course of the campaign, up to level 15, there's a lot of damage you didn't take because of this.
I forgot I even had it because it, almost never comes in now.
Yeah,
because all the damage is not bludgeoning, piercing, slashing. We're dealing with spellcasters, so everything is every other element.
Yeah.
Literally, this is, comes into play with our group when you're, there's rocks that are collapsing, literal rocks.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Rocks fall, everyone dies, but Rachel takes 3 less points.
3 less.
3 less death, yes.
Sometimes it can make all the difference.
Yes.
But also, your character's so hardy that you tend to have plenty of HP anyways at this point. But yeah, I'm with you on Heavy Armor Master. It just feels incomplete.
Yeah, I'd house rule that immediately.
I'd just be like, there's other feats, but I know we were just still figuring things out, so we're like, what would be useful? What are our roles? And I know also, it was part of a flavor thing for your character too, right, Rachel? That she was, all, meaty and...
trying to get heavy armor. And look, I can tank like you, big brother.
Yeah, yeah, because...
I almost took it for mine because he's half drow, and instead of going half human, which a lot of people do, I wanted him to be a bit bulkier, so I said, okay, he's half drow, but maybe half orc instead?
Half orc, half drow?
Yeah, so I could have an excuse of having a really beefy elf boy.
Beefy elf boy.
Beefy elf boy.
Because, elves really get played into that vision of, tall, svelte, character. So I was like, no, I want you to be like full reverse V body type, like just completely from the waist up a block as an elf.
Block of muscle.
Like, I want you to be a block of elf, and it's just because, like, he has a 9 dex, so I wanted to explain that too. And Heavy Armor Master would have worked, but I looked it over, and then I'm like, that 1 point in strength would be real nice for plate armor, but it ain't worth wasting a feat on.
Yeah, definitely not. So, going into the feat I chose as my worst one, it's Grappler. And just to go over what it does, it gives you advantage on attack rolls against creatures you're grappling, and you use your action to try to pin a creature that's grappled by you, so you have to make another grapple check. And then if you succeed, you and the creature are both restrained until the grapple ends. We've had an episode where we talked about grappling, and our biggest thing we've brought up is I think people who look at Grappler often forget what grappling is, and they do assume it's auto-restrain. Now, I know you can get to the point where this does give you a restrain, but grappling itself is never as good as people want it to be.
Yeah, it just limits movement, I think it is, right?
So speed becomes 0. That's it.
You're just locked in each other's arms, you know, you're just not going anywhere. But you can still have the freedom to do all the things you could do. Granted, this gets you to the point where you're restrained, but you're both restrained.
Yes.
So I think part of the reason I'm very much against this feat, I would never take it, partly because I don't play strength characters. So, I mean, I did it like one time. I didn't like it very much, so I've gone back to my dex roots. But for a character that, like, we've talked about a lot about Tony's character, his, like, super beefy, you know, fighter, he has grappled people, but there are so many better ways for him to deal with an enemy than trying to lock them into a mutual restrained situation, because then that gives up all of his other utility.
I bash them with my shield and knock them unconscious.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's what it comes down to. Like, way more simple things are a lot more effective than, like, them just hugging it out in a grapple. I mean, that's how I picture it. They're like wrestling, like, you know.
This speaks to, like, a fundamental problem I have with strength prerequisites too, or like physical stat prerequisites, because Grappler could be really good for monks if it wasn't strength-based.
It requires a strength of 13 or higher.
Yeah.
And monks will very, very rarely have a high enough strength for that, or even to make it useful, which is disappointing because for people that fight open-handed and don't need weapons, they would be perfect subjects for Grappler, especially giving them self-advantage.
Granted, I still feel like they have better things that are available to them in grappling.
Stunning strike, if they go open hand.
And I think that's why I picked Grappler as my worst, not because it's necessarily literally the worst feat, but I can never see it
working.
It would never be what I would choose, or that I know anyone who would choose, because you'd look at all these feats, and then, I've got better options on the table. I just don't ever see it rising into the best option, but I'm open to being wrong.
See, to make it useful, I think it needs some changes. Like, I think the strength prerequisite needs to go, and I think grappling would have to work on either athletics or acrobatics for it to work.
There have been arguments for that, I know.
I know those exist.
And we talked about that in our episode, where we're like, grappling itself is just fundamentally not that great.
There are definitely changes that could be made to even just make it viable, make it playable. Changing it to be dex or strength-based would make it so much more useful.
Just to switch grapple in general, yeah.
Yeah, like because the primary example I think of is like weird leg locks and stuff, and it's always that, we were talking about the Avengers earlier, I always go back to Black Widow doing all of her spinny leg locks and everything. That is a very acrobatic way to grapple someone, and that's all it is.
Right, and it becomes only the domain of the strength character.
Only strength characters will ever be able to grapple someone well.
Yeah, I think we're starting to see a trend with these feats, where it's like, they're too narrow.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that tends to be the biggest issue with them.
I feel like with a feat, you want to get something that you're going to use that's going to be integral to your gameplay as much as possible. It's going to give you more than your class gives you in some respect.
Yeah, it's a balance between flavor and
utility.
Utility. Yeah, right, Rachel. Utility, good word. And I think for Grappler, it's not like anybody can grapple. So it just makes you better at it, but
it's not used that often in general.
Yeah, and if you're super strong,
you're just going to probably punch someone till they're unconscious.
I wish it had a stipulation for, like, stunning someone, where if you grappled them long enough, you'd effectively choke them out for a second and make them dizzy. Because then all of a sudden you have somebody that can choke out a dragon, because there's no size restriction on it.
It's true.
I mean, that's basically what Tony's character has done, just not with grappling, but that's sort of what it amounted to, and I was like, I'm so sad again.
I forgot what I grappled, but I grappled a huge creature because as a Goliath, I'm considered one size larger with a lot of different things. So I think it was like a giant crocodile or something I was just holding in place.
Literally
like,
a giant
and we just pictured it. I'm like, I'm holding its teeth because that's all I can get my arms around.
Yeah.
Like, my monk is a Goliath monk, so I know the feel. I wanted to do a Goliath monk because I had this really great... Have any of you watched Full Metal Alchemist?
Yes.
Alex Louise Armstrong?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was the inspiration for my monk, because that's why I went 4 elements, because I made him a blacksmith, I wanted him to be able to use some earth abilities and so on, but I also loved the idea of this huge bulky guy being super quick.
Yeah.
Like the classic anime disappear from sight and just reappear behind you ominously. Instead, he's 8 feet tall and a Goliath.
Yeah.
He's great.
Tony's just did it to say perfect physical form and flex.
Which
at all
I
of
have
us.
said several times.
I have quoted the let me show you the art passed through the...
Down the Armstrong line for generations.
Only I did it with blacksmithing in like a weird blacksmith flex, which was great.
It's all about the flex.
But my DM did a cool thing where, kind of like what you did with the feats, Bethany, my DM is giving each person who finishes out their backstory, so to speak, a special ability. And we're playing in a setting with him where it's an alternate universe Earth where all of mythological gods exist. So I made mine a Norse Goliath, forgetting that Surtur exists. So all of a sudden, my character is the son of Surtur the Fire Giant, and so my ability was to grow 1 size larger and all of a sudden become like a true fire giant. And like, if you flipped Grappler a little bit to work with stuff like that, it would be amazing.
We hate the grappling.
Oh, yeah.
We just want to fix it. So, Rachel, let's talk about tough.
Tough. Yeah, so it kind of jumped out only because there are other ways to get the same kind of boost, you know, like an amulet of health, which I think is actually better, at least if you don't have a ton of points in con, which I think I only had a +2 when I got the amulet of health, and it is also retroactive. So it was like my hit points went from, you know, a little gap to like through the roof, which is why I'm 10 points behind the tank. And I'm the healer.
The fighter.
The one who's got a max con.
Yeah. So just for reference, it gives you +2 per level. So that means if you have it at level 20, you're getting 40 hit points, which sounds like a lot.
But in that level, you are taking 40 points in one attack. If you're not negating anything.
Very normally.
And
yeah.
Right.
On the other side of that too, if you got an amulet of health at level 20, your con goes to 19, you're getting 4 points a level, or the difference between your natural con modifier.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so Rachel's character has that. Granted, you can't guarantee you're going to get a magic item, but it's not even that rare of an item. So,
It's, I think, rare.
Yeah, it's rare tops.
It's hard to be enthused about a feat that's weaker than a rare magic item.
I will say the only the only upside to it would be the attunement. You have to have the amulet attuned, which means I always have it attuned, and therefore I only have 2 slots to swap other things in with.
Yeah.
I don't do a lot of swapping, though, but if I wanted to, that's not on the options.
That's true. But also you could kind of look at your feats as slots, right? Like, based on your class, you only have so many feat opportunities, and this would hog one for the rest of that build. And
yes.
I mean, even at low levels, an extra 2 HP isn't huge.
No.
I guess.
It's the difference between life and death a lot at low levels, but not so often that it would be necessary, I think.
Yeah, I guess that's sort of my take on it, too. So yeah, I agree, Rachel. It's not that it's bad in and of itself, it's just that there's
better ones to take.
Yeah. It doesn't give you a con boost.
Right. So it doesn't affect any of your con-based skills, it doesn't affect your con-based saves, like, it's just hit points. And it's like, well...
It would actually probably be better if it boosted your con.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah.
If you got a +1 con and you got this +2 per level, I'd be like, okay, now we're talking.
Now we're talking. Like,
yeah, now we're cooking with gas.
Actually, you know what I'd like to see? I'd like to see Heavy Armor Master's current ability shuffled under tough.
You say just kind of merge those and have
merge the two.
Tough
still
heavy
call
armor
it
master?
tough.
Because this is a 1 bullet.
Yeah, you get a +1, or maybe even a +2 to con, and then you take 3 less points of non-magical bludgeoning, piercing, slashing damage, because it's like you're shrugging it off.
Yeah, and it would also make sense because you can explain that this toughness is due to the heavy armor.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so, like, I agree. We fixed it, wizards. We fixed your feats.
Wizards,
We're Kit Bashing.
you got this.
We work for free. But yeah, I think that's a good point. So yeah, highly recommend the Amulet of Health is also what you're saying, Rachel.
Yes, highly recommend
hell
it.
yeah.
It's one of my favorites.
So bringing it for our last week, taking us away from combat. Tony, talk to us about Keen Mind.
So I looked at a lot of feats before I picked Keen Mind, and I was looking for something that I feel like is so dependent on a dungeon master.
That is so
Because
true.
Keen Mind's thing is 100 dependent on a dungeon master. And I think one of the best things I can explain for this is just to explain what Keen Mind does. Your intelligence goes up by 1, which that's good.
Good. It's good. We all like being smarter.
You always know which way is north. Okay? Is good if you're dealing in a campaign or dealing with a lot of different places that like, oh, you're going to get potentially lost a lot. Well, that's going to get thrown out of the window if you always know which way is north, so you know woods are not an issue.
Or buy a compass.
Or just get a compass in game. You always know the number of hours left before the next sunrise or sunset. It's like, okay, so you know how much travel time you have if you're underground or something like that.
You know when magical items recharge, if they recharge at sunrise.
Which is at dawn, that's true. You would know that as well. And then you can accurately call anything you have seen or heard within the past month, which can be good if you're dealing with puzzles and trying to remember faces and stuff like that. Which I know the new season of Critical Role does that a lot with Caleb and all that.
Yeah.
Which, this, by the way, I also see as a cop-out for players to go, so DM, what do I remember about the room? Because I don't bother taking notes.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's a DM annoyance on my part. But all of this goes completely out the window if your DM doesn't care about any of it.
That's so true.
Out of the Abyss is the entirety of the campaign is underground. So knowing next sunrise and sunset doesn't actually matter because eventually you're going to get tired and you can go to sleep and okay, your items will recharge and you'll know it because you're attuned to them or whatever. Accurately calling anything you've seen or heard within the past month, you're traveling so much and so far, most distances between the cities are about a month. So that goes out the window. And knowing which way is north doesn't actually matter because you know which way is north, but the tunnels go in different directions and curve around. So you would still need to make survival checks, even though I know north's that way, but I'm staring at a wall.
But I know that's the way we
I know
should
I need to go north, but that tunnel looks like it's starting to go east before curving, and then that tunnel looks like it's starting to go west before curving.
So I almost feel like this is like someone who they're like, I decided not to be a ranger, but I've like read a lot of survival guides, so I feel
I'm a Boy
like yeah, I'm a Boy Scout.
I got my level 2 badge.
See, I feel like this is almost a campaign-specific one.
Yes, that is kind of my thing where the DM is good with it, where if he's going to throw like puzzles and stuff at you within shorter time spans, I'm like, okay, I can see, yeah, if the DM's good with it. Actually, the DM will then never throw you lost in the woods because like, well, I know we need to go northwest, north's that way, let's go that way.
But I have to say, as a DM, there's a lot of questions players ask, and I would not want to have to answer the how many hours left before the next sunrise or sunset, because I'd be like, it's not going to matter. It'd be like that time we had a whole debate about driving a cart, and I was like, why am I doing this? None of it matters. Why is this happening?
Why did you let it spiral?
It forces a lot of the kind of erroneous information to come out of a game. That usually just bogs down a game.
Yeah.
For me, the one area I can see this becoming a good broken feat is a very political game. Where,
yes,
like, I'm going to be running kind of a neo-noir Sky Pirates game coming up. And I could see Keen Mind, effectively the accurate recall thing, becoming very, very important for that. Because this is a scenario where they're dealing with assassins, they're dealing with spies, they're dealing with people they need to be able to pick out of a crowd.
And maybe it's partly just doesn't work the way we played at our table, which I know Rachel and I are both note takers as players. Like, we both dutifully scribe things down and try to keep track. Not that we remember everything, and sometimes, things get mixed up. But for the most part, we're pretty in tune with what our characters see and know. And I think, yeah, to Tony's point, the whole, like, DM, do I remember this thing? I know some players need that in certain circumstances. We all forget things.
And that's fine, yeah.
Where we're like, oh my gosh, there was the dude we met 2 years ago in real world time who had that cart and tried to sell us that thing. And
he was wearing a purple hat. And you're like,
I'm flipping through pages of notes. But the seen or heard within the past month, I'd say for the most part, I would kind of rely on the players for me as a DM I'd help them out a little bit, but I wouldn't hold them to it and be like, your character must have an accurate recall, because it's just what you've seen or heard. It also says you can recall anything you've seen or heard. I guess you could say this also applies to like having an eidetic memory, like if you were reading a lot, maybe if you were a researcher, kind of, or like if you were looking for assassins, so remembering all the faces you meet. But it almost doesn't sound like that's the intention. It doesn't.
I would love to see this affect wizards as like their spells. Like I would love to see this affected in such a way where it's like, oh, once per day you can swap out one spell.
Because
from
you
your
remember so
spellbook.
well.
Because you accurately recall things so well.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah,
that actually could be interesting if it was incorporated in that way.
And honestly, we've just used int checks, which is really the recommended way to deal with memory stuff. And if you're a wizard, you kind of tend to be able to make int checks to like get that little nudge to give you detail and stuff like that. Like, okay, you do remember that drawing you saw and that detail in the corner.
Mm-hmm. Now, personally, I'd love to manipulate this as a DM and be like, oh, you have accurate recall? You remember this thing from your childhood.
Yes.
And just emotionally eviscerate someone.
It's only the past month, to be clear, for the actual feat.
Yes.
But I feel like this is a feat that I'd say this is a feat. I think players who pick it will be disappointed with how it actually would come into play, unless they've worked really closely with the DM and they're both on the same page about how this is going to make gameplay better. But I think we've only identified ways that it tends to make things worse beyond the memory piece. The
memory piece is the only really, like, could be really good thing, which I agree with you. Like, in a political, like, kind of noir-esque scenario, it works. It can work fantastic. But again, I decided to pick something that is so 100% dependent on the DM.
If you have a monster of a DM who is fantastic with keeping track of time in game and stuff,
calendars,
then all of a sudden it becomes great.
I'm laughing at Tony. Tony keeps track of that stuff, but I know we're short on time, Rachel, for you, but I just say observance better.
Definitely. 100%.
So if maybe some of this was rolled under observant, I would be much more on board if it was more of a just like, you're just a keen observer of everything. You know what's up. Because this just reads as, I'm a kind of crummy ranger.
Yeah, just combine them into ranger training.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Ranger 101.
But yeah, I think that was a good one to pick, Tony. And it took us away from our desire to talk about murdering casters or casters murdering people.
I was about to say, so many are very combat focused and just don't give like a good enough combat boost. This was one I'm like, this, unless the DM, like, you work with the DM well and they're good with it, can be completely worthless.
Yeah.
And it's all DM related.
Yeah.
But yeah. So how did you get into tabletop role-playing games?
Mostly by accident. I had this thing where it was around my birthday at the time. I was talking to a buddy from university, and I had wanted to get into it and try it out for a while. I was a creative writing major, music minor, so I was kind of steeped in that whole creative aspect. And I just didn't have anyone to play with, as is part of the classic story. And then I got to play 2 sessions with that friend and his group, and then it dissolved. It happens.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
I just felt kind of bad because it dissolved pretty much immediately after I joined it. I'm like, oh, I feel bad.
Why is everybody leaving?
Yeah, pretty much. But most of it was scheduling and people moving after school and so on and so forth. So for a couple of months after that, I didn't get to play at all. And then I am part of the Critical Role fan club on Facebook, and one guy posted a posting looking for a game to get running online, and me and 5 other people joined, and I've been playing consistently ever since with that same group too, which is pretty cool. That's actually the group that I do the Dice Nights podcast with now. So
awesome.
Very cool.
Kind of evolved into its whole own thing, which has been absolutely lovely.
Didn't set out to accomplish that, it just sort of happened over time?
Yeah, no, we got very lucky. You know, you hear a lot of horror stories about online D&D groups or online game groups just kind of falling apart at first chance. And then there's us, who clicked very well from the outset, and we've been playing together since, it'll be 2 years this August, so 2017.
Nice.
No, it just sounds like you found your people.
Yeah, there was a point where we were playing 2 games a week with the same group in different campaigns, and just rotating DMs.
Wow. Now my life sounds so boring outside of D&D. I'm full of, like, adult things. 2 games a week is pretty epic.
It doesn't happen anymore because adult things, but...
Makes sense.
You're like, until the adulting happened.
But it was fun and short-lived.
When we all had much more regimented schedules, it was easier, but now that so many people have graduated and so on and so forth, because we had a bit of a broad age range, now that people have to kind of schedule themselves a bit more, it's a bit more difficult.
Yep, the scheduling struggle is a real thing. That's why there's so many memes about scheduling your D&D session online, because we've all been there.
Yes.
We haven't played in like a month. Like, we all keep in touch and we talk pretty much every day, but we just haven't been able to sit down for a game in a month. So, I know the feel.
We project manage our group and schedule things out with polls and stuff like months ahead.
Yep.
We try to be that way, and
Yeah.
it just doesn't happen because we all do so many different things.
Right. It's not for every group. Our group is just sort of locked in. Like it's just a system that currently is working. Otherwise, I fear that we'd all get caught up and wouldn't have time to play, and we all want to play more. It's just
Yeah,
the
and
time.
I feel like part of it for us too is time zones are kind of a major thing. So like for the past year or so, one of our players has been on exchange in Madrid. One of our players lives in Ireland. And the rest of us are either in Canada or the States in various time zones. So it's a bit difficult to schedule around a 5 or 6 hour time difference.
Yeah, it gives you just a couple blocks to work with, right? Otherwise, it's just somebody is up at an unreasonable hour, unless someone's really a night owl.
He wasn't when we started. He is now.
You're like, it's been a fundamental personality change, actually, just to accommodate D&D.
A little bit.
So, you didn't mention what system you're playing. Do you have a favorite system to play?
Started on D&D 5e and have been playing it ever since. That's the content I create for it. And I have looked at other systems. Like, I have all the original Numenera books. I picked up all the Pathfinder books and so on, just to blatantly steal from them for my home games. And I don't know. I think part of the reason why I keep coming back to 5e is just because of how mechanics light it is. And I don't say rules light because there are a good chunk of rules with it, but when you get down to brass tacks, there's not a whole lot of times you have to roll dice or have to do math. And that's what I like about it.
It's certainly a lot more accessible than some of the previous systems we played. Granted, there's systems that are even lighter on that sort of end of things. But, I think it's got a good balance of structure and flexibility.
Yeah, we got lucky in that we found... It's more like the system found us because it was the whole Critical Role Facebook group and all that stuff.
Yep.
But like we found we clicked really well with it because we all enjoy combat to a certain extent. We enjoy the crunchiness of the mechanics to a certain extent, but we are all hefty role players as well. So we can kind of switch modes very easily, and there tend to be those two modes with 5e almost kind of naturally baked in. So
yeah, it's sort of two separate games in a way.
Yeah, it really is.
They utilize the same dice, but they're very different. And the role-playing side of things is pretty rules light. So, do some checks, get some advantage and disadvantage in there. The rest just, does itself. So, last question for the interview, though. Do you have a favorite moment you're most proud of in role-playing?
So I'm a cast member in a horror stream called The Tainted Lands. And like me as a player, one of my favorite role-playing moments from that has all of a sudden become a regular thing. And there was a point where we all woke up to the inn we were sleeping in on fire because the town was burning down around us. And
bad news. Yeah.
It happens. I'm playing a drow, or a half dark elf paladin, and which means me dexterously getting out of a building on fire from a second story ain't gonna happen. And then I remembered, wait, I'm sleeping in another room because our elderly gnome warlock borrowed my room, and he's on the other side of the building, trapped behind fire. And I'm like, all right, guess this is happening. So I've played this character as a glory hunting knight the whole time through, and I'm like, well, time to put his money where his mouth is, I guess.
Yep.
And straight up had him pour a full canteen of water on a blanket, throw it over himself, and charge through the building to go get the warlock. I managed to make a dex check to get across the chasm that opens up in the floor and make it to Toby's room. And standing there, and all of a sudden, the floor caves in behind me, so we aren't getting out.
No. Oh no.
And the only thing I did was, it's an online game, so I can't say I looked at the DM, but I looked at my camera. And I asked the DM just straight up, is there a window? And that resulted in me basically, like, slinging the gnome under one arm, shoulder charging out of a window, and then making sure the gnome landed on top of me, so that he didn't die.
Good call.
Gnome Warlock at level 2 is still very squishy, and therefore did still get knocked out.
But he didn't die in a fire, and...
Yeah, and like, that's one of those things where a lot of people could look at that and say, that's not role-playing, that's kind of like an action encounter moment, but for me, it's one of the proudest moments of me taking an action in character that is in character, and doing something extremely stupid.
Putting it all on the line.
But it made sense.
Oh, I can't believe I forgot about this. We just ended an arc, and we had to, basically to escape from the creatures we've been running from, which we affectionately named the Eyeless, because they're a bunch of humanoids that have had their eyes removed and have grown over with, like, skin and stuff. My DM is great with Eldritch Horrors. So we collapsed a tower behind us and were exiting through some catacombs, and Then we found out the nest was down there, so we had to go through their nest to get out, and they had a bunch of people from the nearby town that had burned down. So we were like, okay, we need a distraction to get through, and we need to save the townspeople. And I'm like, wait, we need a distraction? Cool, see ya. And it was literally like, everyone else in the party is still discussing how they're gonna go, and I'm just like, we need a distraction, right? Cool. I run out, Shield of Faith myself, and just start making noise as the paladin, because I have a 9 dexterity. I'm not going to make that stealth check.
Good to know your strengths.
Somehow,
Play to
we all
those strengths.
survived. Because for some reason, they were just rolling really poorly and couldn't hit me that night. Which was
Hey,
fortunate.
sometimes,
It happens.
You get blessed by a deity, and, it's all good. You just gotta have faith, right?
Oh, at that point, like, there was a point where I chucked my bag of holding at another player because I was sure I was going to die, and somehow I didn't.
Oh, that's so sad. Take my belongings.
Well, it was the group bag, so it was like,
Yeah.
man, if I die here, pitch his bag of holding.
Aw.
But I lived.
Very selfless.
Nice.
It's good paladining. Rachel, can you
I would be
confirm?
proud. Yeah, yes.
Good
Ash would
paladin.
be proud. My paladin would be super proud. She paladin's good too.
Yeah. Rachel's favorite class is paladin. Well,
Yep.
I think you've said maybe others, but overall, you keep coming back to paladin.
Paladin with a really close second of warlock.
Yeah.
I'm reversed. I like Warlock first, and then Paladin has been growing on me. I did a Paladin because I'd never played a full Paladin before.
Good. Yeah, you
Nice.
get to be meaty and a little bit healy and a little bit smitey.
Always hold up 2 points of lay on hands.
I'm not really into paladin, so I'm just like, yeah, I'm sure it's great.
Honestly, I have discovered lay on hands, terrible for healing people, great for keeping people from dying.
Great for
Yes.
It's great for different
Here's a point. Stay awake.
Yeah.
Just one to stay alive.
Pull yourself together.
Yeah, I know, Rachel, you've said that.
Edna
And
mode.
you get a point, and you get a point, and you get a point.
Pretty much.
the Oprah of healing, I think is what we were calling it. Yeah, it's a great ability to have.
Yeah.
Thank you, Eric, for joining us. I had a lot of fun
Yeah.
listening through
Absolute
stuff.
pleasure. This was so
Yeah.
much fun. We should do this again sometime.
Yes, absolutely.
If you ever want to talk about really broken magic items, boy, do I have a story.
Oh, okay. Well, we have a lot of broken magic items. I've perpetuated quite a few as a DM, so I'm
Have I mentioned my Vorpal sword?
No, don't rub it in.
Have a cloak of billowing.
Oh, gosh.
Have I mentioned the iron flask that rolled a planetar?
Oh my gosh.
Was
Wow,
it planetar?
what-
No, it was the top tier, which I think is a solar.
Still, that's a big deal.